When my boss cut my salary by 30% with a single email on Friday afternoon, I thought my career was over, but within a week, I had uncovered a multi-million-dollar fraud scheme that reached all the way to the CEO. What started as workplace revenge became the biggest whistleblower case in my company's history, landing my corrupt bosses in federal prison while earning me a reward bigger than my annual salary. But what did I discover in those financial records that my boss was so desperate to hide? My computer screen lit up with a new email at exactly 4:47 p.m. on Friday afternoon. The subject line made my heart skip a beat. Immediate salary adjustment, action required. Nobody sends good news with words like that. My hand shook as I clicked open the message from Director Marcus Kellerman. 28 words would change everything I thought I knew about my job at Riverside Analytics. Effective immediately, your annual salary will be reduced by 30% due to budget constraints. This decision is final. Report to HR Monday morning for paperwork processing. 30%. The number hit me like a punch to the stomach. After 4 years of perfect reviews, staying late every night, and bringing in more clients than anyone else in my department, this was my reward. I read the email again, hoping I had misunderstood something. The cold, corporate language offered no explanation, no apology, no chance to discuss or appeal. Around me, the office buzzed with Friday afternoon energy. People packed up their desks, chatting about weekend plans and dinner reservations. Nobody knew that my world had just collapsed in the span of a single email. I sat frozen in my gray cubicle, surrounded by the awards and certificates I had earned through years of hard work. My phone buzzed with a text from my wife, Jenny. Picking up groceries. Should I grab stuff for that fancy dinner we planned? We had been saving for months to celebrate our anniversary at the new restaurant downtown. The irony cut deep. Just as we finally felt financially secure enough for small luxuries, everything had been ripped away without warning. I pulled up my employment contract on the company system. Buried in the legal language, I found what I was looking for. Any salary changes required 30 days written notice and a formal meeting with both the employee and HR department. Marcus had violated company policy with his surprise email attack. The anger started building slowly, like water heating in a kettle. This was not just unfair, it was illegal according to our own rules. I had always followed every policy to the letter. I arrived early, stayed late, and never used all my vacation days. My dedication had earned me Employee of the Month 3 times in the past year. Something else bothered me about the timing. Yesterday, I had submitted my quarterly audit review to Marcus. The numbers showed some strange patterns in our client billing that did not match the project reports. I had flagged several discrepancies for his review, thinking I was being helpful. Now, less than 24 hours later, my salary was being slashed. I opened a new document on my computer and started typing. Every detail mattered now. The time I received the email, the exact wording Marcus used, the fact that no meeting had been scheduled, the violation of company policy. If Marcus wanted to play games with my career, I would document everything. My cubicle neighbor Sarah walked by, carrying her purse and car keys. "Have a great weekend," she called out cheerfully. I managed a weak smile and wave, but inside I was screaming. How could I tell anyone about this humiliation? How could I explain that my boss had just destroyed my financial stability with a casual Friday afternoon email? The building began to empty as people headed home to their families. I stayed at my desk, staring at the email that had changed everything. Marcus had already left for the day, probably heading to his country club or expensive restaurant. Meanwhile, I was calculating how Jenny and I would pay our mortgage with a 30% pay cut. I clicked through the company directory, looking at the other employees in my department. Tom, Sarah, Michelle, and David all had the same job level as me. We had started around the same time and performed similar work. Why had Marcus targeted only me for this salary reduction? The question gnawed at me as I gathered my things to leave. Walking to my car in the parking garage, I noticed Marcus's black BMW still in his reserved space. The vanity license plate read Success 1, a constant reminder of his inflated ego. If he was still in the building, why had he sent an email instead of talking to me face to face? Cowards hide behind computer screens when they attack people. The drive home took forever through Friday traffic. Every red light gave me more time to think about the unfairness of my situation. I had sacrificed so much for this company. Missed family dinners, worked through holidays, and even came in when I was sick. This was how loyalty was rewarded in corporate America. Jenny was already cooking when I walked through our front door. The smell of her famous spaghetti sauce usually made me smile, but tonight it just reminded me of all the things we might have to give up. Our small house suddenly felt like a luxury we could no longer afford. "How was your day, honey?" she asked, not looking up from the stove. I stood in our kitchen doorway, holding the printed email in my hand. How do you tell the person you love most that everything is about to change? How do you explain that your boss has just stolen your future with a few typed sentences? Monday morning arrived like a storm cloud hanging over my head. I had spent the entire weekend researching employment law and company policies, building a case that Marcus had violated multiple rules with his surprise salary cut. My notebook was filled with dates, policy numbers, and legal precedents. Jenny had helped me organize everything into neat folders, though her eyes showed the worry we both felt. The office looked the same as always, but everything felt different now. I walked past Marcus's corner office, noting that his door was already closed despite the early hour. His assistant, Mrs. Rodriguez, sat at her desk, typing with unusual intensity. She glanced up as I passed, then quickly looked away. Something in her expression reminded me of a scared animal. Sarah was already at her desk when I reached our department. Her usual bright smile seemed forced this morning. "Hey, how was your weekend?" she asked, but her voice carried a strange edge I had never heard before. I decided to test the waters carefully. "Actually, I wanted to ask you something," I said, sitting on the edge of her desk. "Did you get any unusual emails from Marcus on Friday afternoon?" Her face went pale, and she looked around nervously before shaking her head too quickly. "No, nothing unusual." "Why do you ask?" But her hands were shaking as she shuffled papers on her desk. Sarah was a terrible liar, and we both knew it. I had my answer without her saying another word. During my lunch break, I walked to the HR department on the third floor. The receptionist, a young woman named Amy, greeted me with a sympathetic smile. "You must be here about the salary adjustment," she said quietly. "I've been expecting you. How many others have come to see you about this?" I asked. Amy looked around to make sure nobody else was listening. "4 people total received the same email on Friday. All from your department. All 30% cuts." She handed me a clipboard with paperwork. "I'm really sorry about this. It's not right, and we all know it. 4 people." That confirmed my suspicions that this was not about budget problems. Marcus had specifically targeted a small group of employees for reasons that had nothing to do with our performance. I needed to find out who the other 3 people were and what we all had in common. Back at my desk, I sent carefully worded emails to everyone in my department. "Coffee meeting to discuss quarterly reports and upcoming projects? Interested?" Within an hour, I had responses from Tom, Michelle, and David. All 3 suggested meeting off-site, away from the office. Their paranoia matched my own. We met at a small coffee shop 6 blocks from Riverside Analytics. The afternoon crowd provided good cover for our conversation. Tom arrived first, looking tired and angry. Michelle came next, her usually perfect makeup showing signs of stress. David was last, constantly checking his phone and looking over his shoulder. "So we all got the same email," Tom said without any small talk. 30% salary cuts, effective immediately, no explanation. His voice was bitter. 26 years with this company, and this is how they treat me." Michelle leaned forward, speaking in a whisper. "I think it's connected to the audit reviews we submitted last week. I found some really weird stuff in the client billing records. Money going to companies I've never heard of. Invoices for services that don't match our project files." David nodded grimly. "Same here. I flagged about $15,000 in questionable charges on the Patterson account alone. The numbers just don't add up." He pulled out his phone and showed us a spreadsheet. "Look at these consulting fees. We don't have any consultants working on these projects." My heart started racing as the pieces fell into place. All 4 of us had submitted audit reviews that questioned unusual financial activity. All 4 of us had received identical salary cuts within 24 hours. This was not a coincidence. "Marcus is stealing money," I said quietly. "He's using fake invoices and phony consulting fees to move company funds somewhere else." When we flagged the problems in our audit reviews, he panicked. Tom's face turned red with anger. "That's why he cut our salaries. He's trying to force us to quit so we won't ask more questions about the missing money." He slammed his fist on the table, making our coffee cups rattle. Michelle pulled out her laptop and opened a secure folder. "I've been copying files to my personal drive for months. Not because I suspected anything, but because I like to keep my own records of the projects I work on." Her fingers flew across the keyboard. "If Marcus is stealing, the evidence is all here in the billing records." We spent 2 hours going through Michelle's files, comparing them with David's spreadsheets and Tom's project notes. The pattern was clear and damning. Over the past 8 months, Marcus had created dozens of fake invoices totaling over $200,000. The money was being sent to a consulting company called Sterling Solutions that none of us had ever heard of. "We need to be very careful," David warned. "If Marcus is willing to cut our salaries to cover this up, what else might he do to protect himself?" His words sent a chill through the group. We were not just dealing with a dishonest boss anymore. We were dealing with a criminal who had already shown he would attack our livelihoods. As we left the coffee shop, Tom pulled me aside. "I'm meeting with a lawyer tomorrow morning. Want to come with me?" I nodded, grateful for the support. Together, we might have enough evidence to expose Marcus and protect ourselves. Walking back to my car, I felt a mixture of fear and determination. The salary cut had been meant to silence me, but instead it had revealed something much bigger. Marcus had made a critical mistake by targeting all 4 of us at once. He had created his own group of enemies, and now we were working together against him. My phone buzzed with a text from Jenny. "How did the HR meeting go?" I smiled for the first time in days as I typed back. "Better than expected. I think we're going to win this fight." Tuesday morning, I walked straight into Marcus's office without knocking. His coffee cup froze halfway to his lips when he saw the thick folder in my hands. "We need to talk about Sterling Solutions," I said, closing the door behind me. The color drained from his face like water from a broken sink. "I don't know what you're talking about," he stammered, but his shaking hands told a different story. I opened my folder and spread the printed invoices across his mahogany desk. Each page showed payments to Sterling Solutions for consulting work that never happened. The dates, amounts, and fake project codes were all highlighted in bright yellow. $237,000, I said calmly. "That's how much you've stolen from this company in the past 8 months. Marcus tried to gather the papers, but I pulled them back. "These are copies. I have the originals safely stored somewhere else." His mask of confusion slipped away, replaced by cold anger. "You're making a very dangerous mistake," he hissed, standing up to tower over me. "Do you have any idea who you're dealing with? I built this department from nothing. I decide who succeeds and who fails around here. Then why did you have to steal money?" I shot back. "If you're so successful, why do you need to create fake companies and forge invoices?" My phone was recording everything in my pocket, a lesson I had learned from watching too many crime shows with Jenny. Marcus walked around his desk, moving closer to me. "You think you're so smart, don't you? Let me explain how the real world works." His voice dropped to a threatening whisper. "Accidents happen to people who ask too many questions. Car problems, computer viruses, bad performance reviews that destroy careers. Would be a shame if something happened to your wife's little bakery business." Ice ran through my veins. He knew about Jenny's small cake decorating business that she ran from our kitchen. The threat was clear and personal. "Are you threatening my family?" I asked, making sure my phone caught every word. "I'm just saying life can be unpredictable." He smiled like a snake. "Especially for people who don't understand their place in the corporate food chain." He sat back down and pulled out his own phone. "Now get out of my office before I call security and have you escorted from the building." I gathered my papers and headed for the door, but turned back one last time. "You made one big mistake, Marcus. You cut 4 salaries at once. Now we're all working together against you." His confident smile flickered for just a moment, and I knew my words had hit their target. Back at my desk, I immediately called Tom. "Emergency meeting," I whispered into the phone. He threatened Jenny. "This just got personal." Tom's voice was grim when he responded. "Meet me at the lawyer's office in 1 hour. We're done playing games." The law office of Rodriguez and Associates sat in a converted house downtown, far from the corporate towers where Marcus ruled his kingdom. Attorney Maria Rodriguez listened to our recorded conversation with growing amazement. "This is textbook extortion and embezzlement," she said, rewinding the recording. "The threat against your wife's business is particularly damning." Tom pulled out his own evidence folder. "We've documented everything. Bank records, fake invoices, email timestamps, company policy violations. This guy has been running his own criminal enterprise inside Riverside Analytics." Maria studied our materials for 20 minutes, making notes on a yellow legal pad. "You have enough evidence to prosecute, but we need to be strategic. Marcus clearly has allies in the company, or he couldn't have gotten away with this for so long." "What do you mean?" I asked, though part of me already feared the answer. Someone in HR or accounting had to approve these payments to Sterling Solutions. Someone in management had to sign off on the fake consulting contracts. Marcus didn't do this alone. Her words confirmed my growing suspicions that the corruption went deeper than one dishonest director. We spent another hour planning our next moves. Maria would contact the state attorney's office while we continued gathering evidence. Document everything, she warned. Every conversation, every email, every meeting. These people will try to destroy any evidence once they realize you're serious about exposing them. Walking back to my car, Tom looked worried. What if he really does something to hurt Jenny's business? Or worse? The fear in his voice matched my own growing panic. We had crossed a line from workplace dispute into something much more dangerous. I drove straight home instead of returning to the office. Jenny was in our kitchen, decorating a wedding cake with delicate pink roses. Her face lit up when she saw me, then immediately turned to concern. You look terrible. What happened? I told her everything about the morning's confrontation, the threats, and the lawyer meeting. Her hand stopped moving as the reality sank in. He knows about my business? How? Jenny's small cake decorating operation was barely advertised, just word-of-mouth referrals from friends and neighbors. He's been watching us, I realized with horror. Probably for weeks, gathering information to use against us. The violation felt even worse than the salary cut. Marcus had invaded our private life, turned our dreams into weapons against us. Jenny set down her decorating bag and looked me straight in the eyes. We can't let him win. This isn't just about your job anymore. It's about justice. Her determination gave me strength I didn't know I had left. That evening, I sat at our kitchen table with my laptop, systematically copying every file I could access from the company system. If Marcus wanted to play dirty, I would make sure I had ammunition for the fight. Email records, project files, financial reports, personnel documents, everything that might prove his crimes. Around midnight, my phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. Stop digging or face the consequences. This is your final warning. The message made my blood run cold, but it also proved something important. Marcus was scared enough to resort to anonymous threats. That meant our evidence was working. Wednesday arrived with an email that made my stomach drop like a broken elevator. Mandatory staff meeting. All department employees. Conference room B, 9 a.m. sharp. The sender was David Chin, head of human resources. I had never heard of mandatory meetings being called with only 1 hour's notice, especially not by HR. The conference room buzzed with nervous energy when I arrived. Tom, Michelle, Sarah, and David sat around the large table, all looking as confused and worried as I felt. Marcus stood at the head of the table with David Chin, both wearing identical cold smiles that reminded me of sharks circling wounded prey. Thank you all for coming on such short notice, David Chin began, his voice smooth as poisoned honey. We're here to address some concerning rumors that have been spreading through the department. Rumors about financial irregularities and employee misconduct. My heart pounded as I realized this was a setup. Marcus had told David about our investigation, and now they were going on the attack. I slowly reached for my phone, activating the voice recording app as quietly as possible. It has come to our attention, Marcus said, taking over the presentation, that certain employees have been accessing confidential company files without authorization. They've been meeting secretly off-site to discuss privileged information. This behavior violates multiple company policies and could result in immediate termination. Sarah's face went white as paper. She clearly hadn't expected to be dragged into this corporate warfare. I don't understand, she whispered. What files? What meetings? David Chin opened a thick folder and began reading names and dates. Coffee meeting at Java Junction on Monday afternoon. Attendees: Tom Wilson, Michelle Garcia, David Park, and our concerned employee here. He looked directly at me with eyes like winter ice. Discussion topics included confidential audit reports and unsubstantiated allegations against management. Tom's face turned red with anger. Unsubstantiated? We have documented proof of fake invoices and stolen money. His voice rose with each word, echoing off the conference room walls. Careful, Tom, Marcus said with mock concern. Making false accusations against company leadership is grounds for legal action. Defamation lawsuits can be very expensive, especially for people with reduced salaries. The threat hung in the air like toxic smoke. David Chin smiled and continued his presentation. We're prepared to offer a solution that benefits everyone. Sign these resignation letters, effective immediately, and we'll provide positive references for your job searches. Refuse, and face the consequences of your policy violations. He slid papers across the table to each of us. The resignation letters were already typed, with blanks for our signatures and the current date. You have 5 minutes to decide, David Chin announced, checking his expensive watch. Michelle picked up her letter with shaking hands. This isn't right. We were trying to protect the company from theft. Her voice cracked with emotion and fear. The only theft here, Marcus said coldly, is employees stealing confidential information and using company time for personal vendettas. Sign the papers, take your severance packages, and move on with your lives. I looked around the table at my colleagues' frightened faces. Tom was reading his resignation letter with growing fury. Michelle looked ready to cry. Sarah seemed completely lost and confused. David Park stared at the table, probably calculating his mortgage payments without a job. What if we refuse? I asked, though I already knew the answer would be ugly. David Chen's smile grew wider and more predatory. Then we'll be forced to contact the police about employees who accessed confidential files without authorization. Computer crimes are felonies in this state. Federal charges if any information cross state lines. The room fell silent except for the humming of the air conditioning system. Marcus leaned back in his chair, clearly enjoying our terror and helplessness. He thought he had won by threatening us with criminal charges and financial ruin. I need to make a phone call before I decide, I said, standing up slowly. 5 minutes, right? David Chen nodded, probably thinking I was calling Jenny to discuss our family's financial situation. Instead, I walked to the hallway and called attorney Maria Rodriguez. They're trying to force us to resign with threats of criminal charges, I whispered urgently. Can they really prosecute us for accessing company files? Not if you had legitimate business reasons for reviewing the documents, she replied immediately. Stay strong. Don't sign anything. I'm calling the district attorney's office right now. They've been waiting for insider evidence on corporate fraud cases. When I returned to the conference room, Marcus looked impatient and annoyed. Time's up. What's your decision? He drummed his fingers on the table like an executioner asking for final words. I'm not signing anything, I announced clearly. And I don't think anyone else should either. Tom nodded firmly and pushed his resignation letter back across the table. Michelle hesitated for a moment, then did the same. Marcus's face darkened with rage. You're making the biggest mistake of your careers. When the police arrest you for computer crimes, remember that you chose this path. He stood up abruptly, knocking over his coffee cup and sending brown liquid spreading across the conference table. David Chen remained seated, watching the coffee drip onto the floor. Very well. Consider yourselves suspended pending investigation. Security will escort you from the building immediately. He picked up the phone and dialed an extension. Send security to conference room B right away. As we waited for security guards to arrive, I noticed something interesting. David Chen kept glancing at his phone and checking the time. Marcus paced back and forth like a caged animal. Both men seemed nervous despite their apparent victory. Maybe they weren't as confident as they pretended to be. Maybe they knew that threatening employees and forcing resignations would look suspicious to outside investigators. Maybe our evidence was stronger than they wanted to admit. The security guards arrived and began escorting us from the building one by one. As I gathered my personal items from my desk, I saw Marcus watching from his office window. His expression had changed from triumph to something that looked almost like fear. Walking through the parking lot with my cardboard box of belongings, I felt strangely calm. The battle was just beginning, and I had allies, evidence, and legal representation. Marcus might have won this round, but the war was far from over. Thursday morning brought a phone call that changed everything I thought I knew about Riverside Analytics. This is FBI agent Rachel Torres, the voice on the other end said. We need to meet immediately about your former employer. My coffee mug slipped from my hands, crashing onto our kitchen floor in a shower of ceramic pieces. Jenny looked up from her laptop where she had been researching new business insurance policies. The fear in my eyes must have told her this was serious. Agent Torres continued speaking while I stared at the broken mug. We've been investigating Riverside Analytics for 18 months. Your attorney contacted us yesterday with evidence that could break this case wide open. The FBI field office sat in a gray concrete building downtown that looked like it could withstand a nuclear attack. Agent Torres met me in the lobby, a sharp-eyed woman in her 40s who moved like a predator hunting prey. What you discovered about Marcus Kellerman is just the tip of the iceberg, she said as we rode the elevator to the 4th floor. Her office walls were covered with photographs, charts, and red string connecting various faces and company names. I recognized several pictures of Riverside Analytics executives, including Marcus and David Chen. But the photo in the center of the largest chart made my blood freeze. CEO Victoria Sterling smiled back at me from what looked like a surveillance photograph. Sterling Solutions isn't just Marcus's fake consulting company, Agent Torres explained, pointing to financial documents spread across her desk. It's owned by Victoria Sterling's husband, Richard. They've been using it to launder money from at least 6 different companies over the past 3 years. My head spun as the implications hit me. The CEO is in on the whole thing? She's been helping Marcus steal money? Agent Torres nodded grimly. More than helping. She's been running the operation. Marcus is just a middle manager in a much larger criminal enterprise. The evidence Agent Torres showed me painted a picture of corruption that reached far beyond anything I had imagined. Bank records showed millions of dollars flowing through fake companies. Email intercepts revealed conversations between Victoria and her husband about expanding their consulting business to other corporations. Phone recordings captured Victoria giving Marcus specific instructions about which accounts to target. We needed someone on the inside to help us prove the money trail, Agent Torres continued. Your salary cuts were actually perfect for our investigation. When Marcus tried to silence you and your colleagues, he gave us the evidence we needed to show conscious guilt. She pulled out a thick file folder labeled with my name. We've been watching you for weeks, hoping you would uncover exactly what you found. Your recorded conversations with Marcus are crucial evidence. The threats against your wife's business show clear criminal intent. A chill ran down my spine as I realized the FBI had been monitoring my every move. How long have you known about the corruption? I asked, wondering how many other employees had suffered while the investigation continued. 18 months, but we needed ironclad evidence before making arrests. White-collar crime prosecutions require perfect documentation. One missing piece of evidence, one procedural mistake, and these people walk free. Agent Torres opened another file. That's why we couldn't warn you about the salary cuts. We needed Marcus to keep making mistakes. The weight of being an unwitting FBI informant felt heavy on my shoulders. My family's financial stress had been part of a larger law enforcement strategy. What happens now? I asked, thinking about Tom, Michelle, and David, who were all struggling with unemployment and mounting bills. Tomorrow morning, we execute search warrants on Riverside Analytics, Victoria Sterling's home, and Marcus Kellerman's residence. We'll also freeze all accounts connected to Sterling Solutions and 17 other shell companies. Agent Torres smiled for the first time since I had met her. Your evidence gives us everything we need for racketeering charges. She handed me a business card and a thick packet of papers. These are witness protection forms, just in case. We don't expect retaliation, but Victoria Sterling has connections to some very unpleasant people. Better safe than sorry. Walking back to my car in the FBI parking garage, I felt like I was living in someone else's life. 6 days ago, I had been a regular employee worried about a salary cut. Now I was a federal witness in a multi-million-dollar fraud case that could send my former CEO to prison. My phone buzzed with a text from Tom. Emergency meeting tonight. David Chin called me with a strange offer. Something doesn't feel right. The message made my skin crawl. Agent Torres had warned me that the investigation was entering its most dangerous phase. Desperate criminals make unpredictable choices. I drove straight to Tom's house in the suburbs, a modest 2-story home with a carefully maintained garden. He met me at the front door, looking more worried than I had ever seen him. David Chin wants to meet with all 4 of us tonight. Says he has information about Victoria Sterling that could help our case. Where does he want to meet? I asked, though I already suspected the answer would be somewhere isolated and private. Riverside Park, by the old boat launch. Says it's the only place we can talk without being overheard. Tom's expression told me he was thinking the same thing I was. Why would the head of HR suddenly want to help us expose his own company's crimes? This feels like a trap, I said quietly. Think about it. David Chin was in that conference room when Marcus tried to force us to resign. He threatened us with criminal charges. Why would he suddenly switch sides? Tom rubbed his forehead like he was fighting a headache. Maybe he's scared about going to prison? Maybe he wants to make a deal before everything falls apart. His words sounded hopeful, but his voice carried doubt. I pulled out Agent Torres's business card. I'm calling the FBI. If David Chin really wants to help, he can talk to federal agents in a controlled environment. If he's setting us up, we need protection. The phone call to Agent Torres lasted 15 minutes. She listened to Tom's account of David Chin's invitation, asked several sharp questions, then gave us clear instructions. Don't go to that meeting. Chin is either trying to eliminate witnesses or gather information about our investigation. Either way, it's dangerous. As I hung up the phone, Tom looked relieved and terrified at the same time. So David Chin is part of the criminal conspiracy too? The web of corruption seemed to grow larger every day, reaching into every corner of Riverside Analytics. Agent Torres will handle it, I assured him. Tomorrow morning, this whole nightmare ends. Search warrants, arrests, frozen bank accounts. Victoria Sterling and her entire network are going down. That night, I lay awake thinking about justice and revenge. Marcus had tried to destroy my career to cover his crimes. Victoria had built her fortune on stolen money. David Chin had threatened innocent employees to protect criminals. Tomorrow, they would all face the consequences of their choices. Friday morning exploded with the sound of sirens and flashing lights as FBI vehicles surrounded Riverside Analytics like a military invasion. I watched from across the street as Agent Torres led a team of federal agents through the front doors of the building where I had worked for 4 years. This was the moment I had been waiting for since that terrible email arrived 6 days ago. My phone rang with a call from Tom. "Are you watching the news? They're showing FBI raids live on television." His voice carried excitement and disbelief. Channel 7 had helicopters circling the building while reporters explained that federal agents were executing search warrants related to corporate fraud and money laundering. Jenny squeezed my hand as we watched the coverage from our living room couch. "Look, there's Marcus." She pointed at the screen. FBI agents were leading him out of the building in handcuffs, his expensive suit wrinkled and his face pale with shock. The man who had threatened my family now looked small and defeated. The television switched to another location showing Victoria Sterling's mansion in the wealthy Riverside Hills neighborhood. More FBI agents carried boxes of documents while photographers captured everything. Victoria herself was led away in handcuffs, her perfect hair and makeup unable to hide the fear in her eyes. Channel 12 is reporting that CEO Victoria Sterling and director Marcus Kellerman have been arrested on federal charges including racketeering, money laundering, and wire fraud, the news anchor announced. Sources say the investigation uncovered a multi-million-dollar scheme involving fake consulting companies and fraudulent invoices. Agent Torres called me around noon with an update that made me smile for the first time in a week. "We found everything. Financial records, email communications, recorded phone calls planning the crimes. David Chin tried to destroy evidence when he heard about the raids, but our computer forensics team recovered it all." "What about the other employees who lost their jobs?" I asked, thinking about my colleagues who had suffered alongside me. "All 4 of you will be reinstated with full back pay and compensation for wrongful termination. The new management team wants to meet with you next week about permanent positions." Agent Torres paused before delivering even better news. "There's also a substantial whistleblower reward from the Securities and Exchange Commission. Your cooperation helped recover over $4 million in stolen funds." The amount she mentioned was more money than I had ever imagined having. Enough to pay off our mortgage, fund Jenny's business expansion, and secure our family's financial future. Justice had not only been served, but it came with a reward that would change our lives forever. Monday morning, I walked back into Riverside Analytics wearing my best suit and carrying my head high. The building felt completely different now, like a dark cloud had been lifted from every floor and office. Temporary CEO Margaret Walsh met me in what used to be Victoria's corner office. "We owe you and your colleagues an enormous debt of gratitude," she said, shaking my hand firmly. "Your courage in exposing this corruption saved our company and protected hundreds of honest employees." Margaret was a respected executive brought in by the board of directors to clean up the mess and rebuild trust. Tom, Michelle, and David were already waiting in the conference room where we had been threatened and intimidated just 4 days earlier. Now the same space felt bright and hopeful. Margaret explained that all disciplinary actions had been reversed, our employment records would be corrected, and we would receive promotions with significant salary increases. "Marcus Kellerman's department will be restructured under new leadership," Margaret continued. "We'd like to offer you the position of Director of Financial Oversight, with responsibility for preventing the kind of fraud that nearly destroyed this company." The irony was perfect. The job of stopping corporate crime was being offered to the person who had exposed it. Michelle wiped away tears of relief and joy. "I was so scared we would never work again. My kids have been asking why Mommy was home all day." David looked stunned by the rapid change in our fortunes. Tom just grinned like a man who had won the lottery. Over the following weeks, the criminal cases against Victoria Sterling, Marcus Kellerman, and David Chin dominated local news coverage. Prosecutors had so much evidence that all 3 defendants pleaded guilty rather than face lengthy trials. Victoria received 12 years in federal prison. Marcus got 8 years. David Chin was sentenced to 5 years for his role in covering up the crimes. The whistleblower reward arrived in my bank account 6 weeks later, accompanied by a letter from the Securities and Exchange Commission thanking me for my service to justice and honest business practices. Jenny and I celebrated by paying off our mortgage and opening a savings account for the children we hope to have someday. Jenny's cake decorating business flourished with our new financial security, allowing her to invest in professional equipment and marketing. Funny how Marcus threatening my business actually helped it grow. She laughed while designing a wedding cake shaped like a castle. Fear made me realize how much I really wanted to succeed. 3 months after the arrests, I received a letter from Marcus in federal prison. His handwriting was shaky and uncertain. "I'm sorry for what I did to you and your family. Prison gives you time to think about the people you've hurt. I hope someday you can forgive me." I read it twice, then filed it away. Forgiveness might come eventually, but justice had already been served. Working as Director of Financial Oversight, I implemented new safeguards to prevent future fraud. Every invoice was double-checked. Every consulting contract required multiple approvals. Every financial report was reviewed by independent auditors. The systems I created would protect future employees from experiencing what my colleagues and I had endured. Standing in my new office, the same space where Marcus had once threatened my family, I looked out at the city skyline and reflected on the journey from victim to victor. A simple salary cut had revealed massive corruption. Threats and intimidation had backfired spectacularly. David's attempt to set us up had provided the final evidence needed for prosecution. The corporate criminals who had tried to destroy my career were now wearing orange jumpsuits and counting down the years until their release. Meanwhile, I was building a better future for honest employees everywhere. Sometimes justice takes time, but when it finally arrives, the victory is worth every moment of struggle.